Welcome back to A Bit of Curiosity. So happy to have you with me today. I appreciate you taking some time out of your day to give us a listen. It's great to have you. Today I'm riding solo. I've had a lot of thoughts recently, just personal experiences that have really impacted me about being present and how to make ourselves more presently self aware, how to utilize our time more efficiently. I've read several books recently that have impacted the way that I'm thinking along these lines. I've mentioned several of them on this podcast. Anti-Time Management, which I'll reference in this episode, from Richie Norton. The One Thing by Gary Keller and Jay Papasan. Just these ideas of being more self-aware. Reading again Brendan Burchard's book, A Motivation Manifesto. Just thinking about Walden from Henry David Thoreau and several of these other great works of mindfulness, of purpose, of intentionality. And I, I really appreciate us as humans and the experience that we get to go through. A couple weeks ago, I took an ad hoc road trip from my home here in northern Utah. Partially, it was to go warm up. I drove to Southern California, but it was also really just to go find some presence, go find some connection with myself, with my thoughts, with nature. I do photography, and I post some of those on my Instagram at Jeremy W. Howlett. But I also just really love capturing the art and the beauty of what has been created and what's been given to us and the abundance that we have. But along that trip, I drove from LA up through Ventura and then up into Morro Bay and then up. Kind of had to skip the coast because Highway 1 was closed through Big Sur. So unfortunately, I didn't get that part of the trip. But up into Santa Cruz and then up to through South Bay and to the Bay Area, and going going through a few of those places and spending some time there with a camera really allowed me to connect. It allowed me to connect with what was with my surroundings. Allowed me to connect with my thoughts of what exists and what is and what's there. But I recall a specific experience when I went. So I woke up kind of at the foot of the Golden Gate Bridge to a beautiful sunrise, just glorious, lots of great color and just I can't say contrasting, but really accentuating the red of the Golden Gate Bridge and just lighting it up, and especially overlooking the city across the bay. Looking at the city of San Francisco. It was beautiful. And I went from there really in a mindset of just peace and calm and joy up into Muir Woods National Monument, which is just there in Marin County, really 15 minutes outside of San Francisco. If you've never been, it's worth the trip. Massive redwoods, just tranquility, peace. My reservation was 8 a.m., the first available reservation. As I was heading up there, I saw signs that said reservations required, and I was like, oh, shoot, I hope I can still get one. And thankfully, I was able to. All the 9 o'clock reservations were booked, and most of the times after that, but 8 and 8:30 were still available. And so I grabbed an 8 a.m. time, and I rolled into the parking lot as probably the 10th car into the parking lot. And I went in, got my National Parks pass, walked through, and as I started my walk, I was all alone, and I was able to just take my camera and my tripod and look at just the magnificence of the trees, the green peace. I got to watch a snowy egret as it went along the creek looking for its breakfast, and just that connectedness, that presence that I felt was it was transcending is probably an appropriate word to use. But it was just this state of like, okay, I exist. I'm existing right now. I am. Gives me thought of Rene Descartes, right? His meditations as he seeks to know, okay, what is real? Is God real? Is all like what is all of this? And through his existential thoughts, and kind of comes to the famous statement, "I think, therefore I am," and because I am, I have been created and God exists. And that's really pared down, right? But the "I think, therefore I am" is comes from those meditations of Descartes, and it's just this moment of just thinking and being and feeling just both inside and out, and experiencing the kind of the cool fresh air and the beauty and the flow of the creek right through the bottom of these beautiful redwoods, and the ferns that were growing. And yeah, it was amazing. It was such a cool experience. And I jotted down here a quote from Henry David Thoreau, as he wrote in Walden. He said, "You must live in the present, launch yourself on every wave, find your eternity in each moment. To be awake is to be alive. I have never yet met a man who was quite awake. How could I have looked him in the face? We must learn to reawaken and keep ourselves awake, not by mechanical means, but by an infinite expectation of the dawn." And such a profound statement, right? Like, are we truly awake? Or are we just kind of going through the motions each day? We get up and we go and we punch the clock. We go through, we check our email. We respond to what's necessary. We come up with a few good ideas. We come home, turn on Netflix, we go to bed, we do it all over again. And in there we eat, maybe we exercise and whatever. I saw a quote the other day on Instagram, and I'm totally gonna butcher it, but it was by Paulo Coelho, the author of The Alchemist. And he essentially says that adventure might be dangerous, but routine is lethal. And as I look at that, it's like, okay, like, how does my routine help me be more present? And how is it lethal within my life? I've revamped my morning routine several times over the years, and right now it consists of getting up, making my bed. Kind of, is that a Jocko Willing, whoever said that, right? Like, there's books out there, right? But I make my bed, I accomplish something, right? Then it's my morning conversation with God. Some days that's brief, some days it's longer, some days it involves some more meditative state. And then I'll usually come down to my office, and I'll read something spiritual, religious related, and I'll study that for a little bit. I'll write in my journal. I do the 5 minute journal, kind of modified to my liking. Go over 3 things that I'm grateful for, 3 things that I want to accomplish throughout the day that will make me feel fulfilled. There's a affirmation statement in there, and then there's some other things that I've thrown in, as far as like, who am I going to give appreciation to in that day? Who am I looking to be today? So it really gives me some cause to think and be awake, right? Like, alert, attentive to who I am and what I'm trying to accomplish throughout the day. Then I try to review my goals. I've got my goals written down right now in the Apple Notes app. I also have them written in my journal. That way I can review them regularly to see, okay, am I on track for these? And then within achieving those, right? Like, I'll look at the things that I need to accomplish during that day if I haven't already put some to-dos in for the day. And then I'll help my daughters get ready and get off to school. And then when I get back is usually my time to work out. So whether I go for a run, I do a strength workout down in the basement, and then I try to do some yoga every day. I try. I'm not very good at it, not so overly consistent with it, but it it again, that brings me into a state of presence, because it's relaxing, it's opening up my muscles, it's opening up that state of flow within my body. And then after I shower and get dressed, maybe throw in a protein shake, I'll then come back to my office, and ideally I'll spend some time creating. So for that next hour, hour and a half is my time to create. So based on whatever goals I'm trying to achieve, I will spend time creating. That could be editing photos, that could be writing, that could be reviewing podcast content, but I'm looking to unlock and utilize that freshness that I have from waking up, from exercising before I get into the afternoon to when it's kind of the afternoon drain, the afternoon sleepy time. And I'll usually fit in some reading from whatever book I'm reading at that time. On my run or my walk, I will almost always listen to an audiobook or a podcast so that I'm getting more good information coming in. And the other thing that I've also added, and I shared this on my Instagram a few days ago, but one thing that I'm added is sending out a video, just a gratitude video, to usually 2 to 3 to 4 people a day. I was put out onto that by Ed Milet, who in one of his recent podcast episodes laid out the 20 things that he tries to do every day. And that was one of those things. And so it gives me a chance to connect with somebody that I maybe met recently, or a friend that I haven't reached out to, or a friend that I have reached out to recently, but to express gratitude, to express that I'm thinking about that person. Maybe it's somebody's birthday. I want to send them a birthday wish on that day. But I love the video because it's different, it's unique, and it's also a way that I can be real me, right? It's not just a little note on their Facebook wall or even a text, right? It's more connected. And I think we need that human connection, and that helps us to be more present, right? Like, we're more thoughtful as we're talking and trying to portray what we want to share. And then, yeah. And so that's my morning. Then usually like meetings, podcast episodes, other things are fit into there. Beyond that, I'm not as good with my evening routine, but when my morning routine really helps me set up the day to be more present, and it helps me to just be connected with who I am, what I'm striving to achieve, what I'm striving to become. I like this quote from um, Thich Nhat Hanh in his book Your True Home. He says, "Your true home is not in the past. Your true home is not in the future. Your true home is in the here and the now. Life is available only in the present moment. And if you are not fully present, you miss your appointment with life. When you settle into the present, touching the wonders of life within and around you, you will discover a deep sense of peace and belonging. No matter where you are, if you can return to this moment, you are home." And yeah, the more we learn to embrace that moment, that present moment, the more we live, the more we unlock the opportunity to live. If we're too caught up in the future, too burdened by the past, or even living in the past, right? Like the Uncle Rico syndrome, right? Like coach would have done this, right? Like always out with his football outside of his van, or never progressing to become who he could really become, right? But we're always living in those good glory days, or those days of sorrow, those days of, "Oh, I was wronged this way." If we hold on to that and we don't learn to let go, it will confine us. It will hold us back, and we will not be able to be present in the moment. I mentioned Anti-Time Management by Richie Norton. I've gotten to know Richie. He's been on the podcast, and I'm grateful for the things that he's written, for his coaching, his guidance. And one of the things that he talks a lot about is what he calls Gavin's Law. And Gavin's Law came about because his son, Gavin, passed away unexpectedly as a young boy. And then also his brother-in-law, who was also named Gavin, passed away too early. And both of these events really shook him and his family. And then he's had other moments, and he shares a lot about them in the book. His son got in a car accident and thankfully survived, but was really messed up for a little bit and spent his 12th birthday in the hospital. Had to get reconstructive surgery on his face, right? Like, but so in his experience of all of this, it really shook him and made him really think, okay, what am I doing in my life to make my family and the things that are most important to me? What am I doing to be present in the things that I really want to be present in? And so Gavin's Law is essentially live to start to live. And so as we look at that, it's really this essence of, okay, I'm living, and I'm living to create. I'm living to start something. Like, I'm living to do and unlock who I truly am, the inner self, as Spencer Taggart refers to, right? The divine self that's inside us. And then we're starting to live. We're living each day. We're embracing these moments because we don't know how short these moments could be. And so we're seeking to be present with every one of them that we can in the moment. It's how many times have our children tried to show us something cool or exciting that they're doing or they're learning, and we're too focused in on replying to the text or scrolling on Instagram or the email or whatever, right? Like, yes, there's times that we need to focus if we work from home and be free from distractions and time block that out. But if we're just at the kitchen table and they're trying to show us something or they're trying to get us to help them with something, but we're too absorbed with other stuff, we're not present. We're not there with what should be the most important. And so we need to reassess that. We need to take a look at that. One of the things that Richie talks about as far as, okay, anti-time management, right? Like it's really kind of blowing up this idea of time management and how do we manage our time and how do we balance between how do we have work-life balance, which I believe is a myth, right? Like in the one thing they talk about counterbalancing. You can never truly have balance. David A. Bednar has talked about this as well and in some writing and some stuff, is that like you can only, if you're spinning plates, for example, right? Like you might leave a few plates spinning, but you can only be spinning one plate at a time. You can either be present in a conversation with your wife or you can be replying to a work email. You can't be doing both at the same time. Our minds don't work that way. As much as we want to believe that multitasking works, it doesn't. Multitasking is a word that came about in the invention of computers. And it's essentially the idea around a computer being able to do more than one task at a time. The fact is the computer's not actually doing more than one task at a time. It's cycling those tasks, but it's doing it very rapidly, so it's able to quote unquote multitask. We're not able to do that. We're either focused on one thing or another. Yes, we can chew gum and walk at the same time. We can breathe, our hearts beat, right, while we're talking, while we're having a conversation, or while we're out riding a bike, right? Like, I can talk and ride a bike at the same time. Like, there are things that I can do, right? Things that take cognitive function, I can only do one of those, right? How many times are you focused in on something and you're working on something and your child comes in? Like earlier today, I had this experience. I'm focused on going through some photos, and that's where my attention was. And my daughter comes in to get me to make her a sandwich, and I got bits and pieces of it, and I'm like, yes, yeah, I'll do that. But then as I went to go do it, I was like, wait, what did you want? And I knew it was what kind of sandwich did you want? What did you want? Like, I had to clarify, right? Because I was not present with her. I was present with what I was working on here. I couldn't multitask, right? Like, I couldn't fully give her my attention. I needed to stop what I was doing and turn and listen to her, which is what I should have done, but it's not what I did. And so to achieve this, to open up our lives, to allow us to have more flexibility, more freedom, one of the things that Richie talks about in anti-time management is to compress our goals. And what he means by that is that compress your goals, take what you want to accomplish and make it serve two purposes essentially, or more. Some examples of compressing goals would be, instead of waiting until retirement to travel the world, design a business that allows you to work remotely. So you can live anywhere. You can go and you can spend 3 months in Asia while you're working. You can go spend, and don't like, working on vacation is different than living remotely and working, right? Like, you are ingrained in the culture, the people, the community, right? Like when you're working there, because you can't be as present on vacation. You're not stepping outside of the box truly when you're taking your laptop with you and you're working 6, 8 hours a day still, right? Like, it becomes challenging. However, it's not bad to try and fit that in certain ways, right? Another is, instead of delaying time with family for financial success, build a career that integrates meaningful family time. I just had a conversation with Dusty Rhodes, who his podcast episode will release in the next week or two, but he shared his kind of reasoning, like he talks through his experience of he was going to go to med school, and he had studied biology in college with a plan to go on to med school. And with that in mind, that's what his focus was. But while he was in college, he started building his apparel business. And then his daughter was born, and that changed his world. He l- just wanted to spend every moment he possibly could with her and just be around, be dad. And he knew that with residency, with internships, with schooling, with all of that he was going to have to face going to med school, that would be very hard for the next 6 to 8 years. And so he decided to give up on that and lean into this dream of pushing and growing his apparel business. And now he's got a successful apparel business, which 3 out of his 4 children all work for his company now. And so he has designed a company where his family can be there. His wife works with him, right? Like it is an environment where they're all together. That is compressed goals, right? So, and it's also a job or a business that affords him the opportunity to travel to Asia. And so, okay, that's compressing another goal, right? Like the ability to travel and go see the world. So, looking at ways like that, right? Like, um, so don't trade success for life. Don't trade life for success. Try and find a way to compress those, to balance those, because you got to look at, okay, what's core to me? Like maybe the most important thing to you is just running and growing and building a business, and that's what you want. That's your sole focus, right? Like that's fine if that's your thing, right? Like, and that's what you feel like your purpose is. But if your values and your core values are something other than that, then maybe that's not where you should be spending your time. So I believe it's possible. I believe it's possible for us to have a free life, even if our talent, like, and find ways to counterbalance it, right? Time is our greatest asset. It's one thing that we can never get back, right? Like, once it's spent, it's not going to return. I can spend $1 and I can get it back. Just go work hard, go do something, right? Like, there are ways to make money and bring it back. So, bringing in a quote as I close this from Michael Singer in the Surrender Experiment, like there's a lot of fears, there's a lot of doubts, there's a lot of people that'll say that's not possible, right? But to those who don't believe it's possible, I want you to go beyond those thoughts, right? Michael Singer says, the voices in my head were often filled with doubt and fear, but as I learned to surrender to what life was presenting me, I began to realize that the mind's negativity was not a reflection of reality, but a reflection of its own conditioning. When I stopped identifying with the negative voices and simply observed them, they lost their grip on me. I discovered that by surrendering to life's flow and trusting in the process, the mind would quiet itself naturally. In moments when I resisted the urge to give in to fear or self doubt, I found that I could act from a place of calmness and clarity, and not from the chaotic voices of my mind. It was in these moments of surrender that I found my true strength, not in fighting the negative thoughts, but in letting them pass without giving them power. Thoughts are always going to come. There's going to be ideas, there's going to be things in front of us, and there's always an excuse. There's always a naysayer. There's always fear that can stop us. But it's our duty to not let that be the controlling factor. For us to take control, take ownership of our opportunities, take ownership of our future. That's being present. That's living within ourselves, is not letting the voices, not letting the naysayers dictate what we can accomplish. I believe it's possible. I believe that we have power within us to achieve great things, but we need to learn to be present and acknowledge what the abundance the universe is giving us, and then go out and seize it. So, whether that takes time in meditation, time in prayer, time in walks, as I mentioned earlier, I usually listen to an audiobook or a podcast when I'm out on a walk or run. Sometimes I turn it off to be in silence. I don't usually listen to the radio when I'm driving. I usually try to keep it quiet, keep it in silence, to be thoughtful, mindful. It becomes a very good time to meditate, to pray. Great moments for me. I invite you to do the same. Again, thank you for joining me today on a bit of curiosity. I hope this was beneficial. I'd love if you'd rate us on your podcast app. Just write a review. Share this. Hopefully, this was beneficial for you. Thanks again. We'll see you next week.